everyone. Welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I am your host, Grenadier One. As always, I hope you're having a good week. I've had a good one at least. Nothing bad happened to me personally, I guess. Hopefully, you all can say the same. It's been an interesting week nationally, but we're going to focus on the thing that has been kind of boiling in the popular media, and I just have not devoted really much time to it over the last few weeks. I've had other things, on my mind, and just wanted to do something different. But the topic for the show this week, we are going to talk about Twitter and Elon Musk. Since Musk purchased Twitter, he has drawn the ire of the left, who've had meltdown after meltdown, and their world is facing extinction. Already Musk has been on the hot seat for and under the scope and fire of every mechanism that the left can start bringing to bear on people. And they've been watching and studying for anything that they can to kind of pry open a crack and a weakness for them to exploit. And they've certainly been doing that pretty intensively over the last few weeks. Now, a short while back, Musk announced that Twitter had emails and communications detailing the efforts and requests to censor content that was posted on the site about the Hunter Biden laptop scandal. Now, these communications were between Biden campaign and Biden administration officials and a special team that Twitter has in place that is specifically there to censor content and ban users. And this team at Twitter has, was known to government, but as far as we know, it was really kind of unknown to anyone else outside of certain circles. At least, like I said, as far as we know, it was kept a secret, even if it was known amongst maybe certain journalists or something like that. It was still kept a secret. And their job was to remove content and ban users of Twitter who continued to post that content, that anything that the officials were concerned about. Basically, this was an email box that the government and campaign people would email Twitter and identify specific posts or users that they wanted banned, and the Twitter team would ban them. There doesn't seem to be any information or any indication at this point that they ever really pushed back and said, "Oh, we're not going to ban that person." Maybe slightly. Maybe they said, "Well, this maybe doesn't constitute what we call, as a problem." But then eventually the person would get banned anyway. But I haven't seen anything like that. Maybe it's out there in this broad release of information that Musk has put out. The first drop and the second drop came out today, but it just doesn't look like it. It looks like they were fairly willingly participants in this. And basically everything that people on the right were complaining about and talking about for months, going all the way back into the 2016 election, but certainly very prominent in the 2020 election, was factual. Twitter literally was conducting censorship of information, regardless of whether it was valid information and truthful information, at the behest of those who were politically damaged by that information. So we've moved out into the open light where it can no longer be denied something that was called a conspiracy theory just, a few months back. It's out in the open now. This is a significant, or has significant ramifications for all involved here, because this is I think it's a violation of civil rights and certain legal standings. And I know that people will throw out that, Twitter's a private company and they can do that. But in this case, I'm not sure that's necessarily correct. And for a specific reason, for kind of the route that I think that things will go. The courts have ruled differently on cases, kind of depending on how the situation was and who was harmed, or what was said in the communications that were coming from government to a private entity. They want a specific element in place to conclude that a private company acted because they were there was an implied or implicit threat of retaliation if they did not act, because that is where it crosses the line and it becomes the government using a private entity to subvert the Constitution or subvert legal statutes or whatnot. So that's the key point. If they felt that there was a threat involved and acted, then the government overstepped its bounds and there was a violation. And the way this looks like it could play out is that specific individuals involved in being censored or banned would sue Twitter. And at that point, Twitter would then either admit that they were legally liable for any damages that were caused to that individual, which would likely be a fairly steep hill to climb for the average user, whoever lost their Twitter account just because they were, Joe Schmo out there that retweeted a Trump tweet or something like that and got banned, probably cannot show that there were any damages. But if you were higher up, you might be able to show that. They would have to admit that, or they would have to argue that because they were pressured to act by the government, that they were legally shielded from that liability. And that would open a pathway to suing the government. Specifically officials who may be personally liable. And let me elaborate on that a little bit, because what the majority of the emails I have seen from the information that Musk has released is showing is that in most cases, these government officials were using their government emails to send the request to this Twitter team. And that means that they were acting with their government authority and in the name of that government authority. Now, I don't think it's terribly difficult to make the argument that, like I said, there was an implied or implicit threat there. If you send someone a email with your government ID or government email address, and it's kind of a hint like, hey, this is official, and there is this kind of implied idea that, well, if I don't act, if I don't do something, then this person in the government's going to take action. So I think this is a huge problem for some of these people. Musk, by releasing this information, has kind of opened a massive can of worms. Government officials using their position to influence the media and what the media is reporting can be looked at as a criminal violation and not just a civil violation. So, I'm not a lawyer here, so I can't state specific laws in question. But we have seen public officials criminally charged or at a minimum removed from office for lesser violations that are kind of in this same vein. So, there's going to be a fallout from this. And it may just simply be like, the embarrassment of this, or the image of impropriety that has taken place that causes some of these officials to step down, if they're not already out of office by now anyway. But, you never know. Some people who just were reelected to office might fall into this category here. So we'll have to see what happens. But normally I would come down on the side of, nothing's going to happen here. But I have a feeling that's not the case with this. I don't think Musk would release this information just to kind of stir the pot. I suspect that there was probably an internal conversation between him and his legal team when they found out, after the purchase of Twitter, that they had this information on hand and what it could mean for the company in terms of that liability. Now, I have no doubt that conversation went, along the lines of, well, hey, do we keep this a secret and just, take the risk, or do we come out and give it up on our own so we can show that we're, not covering it up and continuing to be liable for this? As you should, generally know, it's the cover-up that gets you in trouble. So I think the Musk lawyers correctly advised him to kind of get out ahead of this and voluntarily release it. Possibly, maybe even cooperate with some potential plaintiffs in legal cases to kind of reduce that legal impact it might have on the company. I think Twitter now is better served by siding with the victims of this in legal action against the administrations that were submitting these. And let's call them demands because I think that's what they were. Now, do I think Twitter was actually coerced into doing this? No, of course not. Okay, there was, yes, there is an implied or implicit threat when someone from the government contacts you, but when you're willing, there's not really much of a need for that threat. So they were complicit and voluntarily did this, and it clearly fit into their internal bias. So, I think the people that were there at the time acted out of their own volition and willingly. What I want to happen though is a message needs to be sent. I think Twitter has shown that, now under new management, that it is willing to take the publicity hit from admitting that this bias existed, and that it was at work, and it's suffering from that. It's suffering, loss of stock price, loss of revenue, as a result of all this, which likely it's likely would exceed any damages that they would have to pay out to people, at least for the most part. Like I said earlier, Trump or some others might have a stronger case for monetary damage, but I think that would just be really kind of hard to prove to a jury. Now, I don't know. You might be able to go somewhere and find a jury that would give somebody, I don't know, $900 billion for something like that. But where do you find those kind of juries, right? Uh, anyway, the damage to Twitter is kind of already done, at least in my opinion. Those responsible are gone from the company, and many of those, left in very embarrassing public firings. I don't know that fining or punishing Twitter at this point helps or really kind of forwards the process or makes things better. I think that would discourage future companies that find themselves in a similar situation from coming clean. But that said, I think every effort needs to be made to punish the public officials who used Twitter to suppress information to the fullest extent of the law. The good thing is that this can be done at the state level. And why is that a good thing? Well, we know our Department of Justice is corrupt and beholden to the same masters as the targets of these actions are. Whoever would be doing this, it's the same people pulling the strings. But at the state level, we still have some attorneys generals who will utilize their office to kind of push for, I guess you could say our side, but at least what should be right. At least we likely do. Cases can be made in the various states where these things took place, like Arizona, for example, and local judicial branches and agencies will be able to act on them. So this can definitely help move the needle in our favor, I think. Our side of the situation. The real question is, will anything else likely happen? I don't know the answer to that. My gut tells me that beyond some limited civil or even criminal actions against some fairly low-level employees, maybe a governor. I think the governor of Arizona is on the hot seat or is going to be on the hot seat for this. Maybe some highly visible political candidate in some other location, and that might come out. But I doubt much else comes of this. I don't think Trump is going to get much traction with this, at least from the standpoint of pushing his case that he was the legally elected president. But given what this administration is about to try and push on the public regarding Trump and what his own party is trying to do to him, what we likely will witness is that President Trump is going to use the legal and public relations actions stemming from this information release to counter the criminal cases that the government are working on, putting on him. He's going to show, kind of try this in public, the court of public opinion. He's going to show that these cases are politically motivated and that there was indeed, has been a political witch hunt surrounding him since the very beginning of his candidacy. And his hardcore followers already believe this, and I don't think we can really argue that it's not the case. I mean, anyone with a clear eye to see things, can see what's happened to him, and in the media and from the establishment. It's pretty blatant that the powers that be, whoever they are, name them, name whatever one you want, it was against Trump and is against Trump. Trump, however, can use this to kind of build, another groundswell of support among swing voters, and that's something I think the establishment's going to be very much afraid of. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few months. We'll kind of keep watching that and keep talking about it as it pops up and percolates and things start happening. And what's also going to be interesting to see what additional details are going to come out from this. At the time of me putting the show together, there's more information that's going to be released. I haven't seen all of the stuff that's really came out today, other than some of the new, the headlines. But there's more information that's coming, and this was not all of it today. There's more. So we could see some. I don't want to use the term bombshell because that term means absolutely nothing these days, because everything's a bombshell. But there's already a second somewhat scandal that is coming to light in the last day or so, and that's the person who was a significant player on this team for Twitter was none other than a former FBI agent, and the agent was named Jim Baker. He was also a very prominent member of, what is it here, Operation Crossfire Hurricane, yes, which was the efforts by the FBI and other agencies to build a case for, foreign espionage and influence, of Donald Trump and his campaign. In fact, this agent was the agent that supposedly was working on vetting the Steele dossier that was, became such a central point to all of that. So, as you know, all of this has come to be proven garbage and discredited. So the same guy who had a, raging hate boner for Trump while he was in the employment of a government criminal investigation that he helped orchestrate, finds himself in the position of being a gatekeeper for information at Twitter, and specifically information that might damage the Biden administration or prove that Trump was correct when he said the FBI and the DOJ were pursuing a witch hunt against him. Very, very interesting stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. So it's just more fuel for the fire. Now, let me say something here, because I don't want to be accused of being a, blind MAGA Trump supporter or an apologist, because I'm not, and I think most of you know that already. But maybe there's some new listeners that don't know my positions on some of these things. So I think I've said this on the show before. That there are things that I like about Trump, and there are things that I don't like about Trump. There are things that I don't like about how he has, handled the 2020 election, and I'll leave it at that to keep it from derailing my own show, but and going off into areas that might get something pulled off the channel. But needless to say, he's not someone that I think terribly highly of. But he is, however, a victim here. Like it or not, he was legally elected president. And what I find far more disturbing and frankly terrifying is that we have inside of our government a movement, a group of people who either through coordinated actions or just blind adherence to a shared belief or shared ideology, whatever you want to call it, they acted to subvert the will of the people of this country, the will of that election. These politicians who want to come out here and, roll out how concerned they are for our democracy, our sacred democracy, and the integrity of the political process. They actively and willfully turned a blind eye to the actions of non-elected government employees who undertook and continue to undertake a campaign of vendetta against this man because he dared to get himself elected and go against the establishment. They didn't like him. They didn't like what his political ideology was or his agenda, whatever you want to think about it, whether you agree with it or not. Enough people voted for the man to put him in office. And, that's how our system works, whether you like it or not. And it is not the responsibility, the job, or the duty of the people who work for us to try to subvert the man that we have put in charge of them. And these are the same people and forces that publicly executed another guy who threatened them in Dallas 60 years ago. At the time, if it had been known with the certainty that we have today that government agents were involved with that plot, in the same way that we know government agents were involved in the efforts to undermine President Trump, because of how well JFK was liked, there would have been a revolution. And the fact that Trump is unpopular with half the country is the only reason we didn't have one in the last few years. There's just not enough mass behind that idea yet. Not enough pain, not enough will to recognize what happened, not enough clearing of the fog to see that the whole of the government and the corporate establishment is aligned against you to feed off of us and drive us into the grave. At least there's not enough yet. Now that's all I got time for today, guys. Come see us over on Gab and the Mothership, and I will see you on the next episode.